There are very few films that have the prestigious honor of having the rating of a 10 out of 10 on my IMDb page. On my personal IMDb ratings page, the ones that have a 10 out of 10 are a couple of episodes of Scrubs, Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, The Dark Knight, 50/50, which I'm not entirely sure if I would necessarily still give that a 10 out of 10 these days because I saw it a long time ago. The first time I saw it was almost 10 years ago. I was a very different person back then, and I had a very intense reaction to it at the time. Now I would sort of view it as being a solidly good movie. I'm not sure if I would still give it a 10 out of 10, but for now the rating stays there. There Will Be Blood is another 10 out of 10 rating. And just recently, I decided that I really had no choice but to change my 9 out of 10 rating for Mary Poppins to the solid and decisive and well-deserving 10 out of 10. For the longest time, I've sort of wondered what my most favorite Disney movie is, if it's the original Lion King or if it's Mary Poppins. I love The Lion King so much just because of the music, the animation, the voice acting, the story. I mean, everything about it is so great. But it does indeed have a few flaws. One of them being Matthew Broderick as adult Simba. I'm just not a fan. I've kind of gone into this, I've touched on it at least with my review of the 2019 remake. And also the ending, or I should say like right up until the ending, there's just like a couple of weird things that don't necessarily work for me. But aside from that, the movie is flawless. I especially love it these days because as a kids movie, as a Disney animated film that is geared towards kids, which is just anathema to me whenever I hear anyone say that Disney is only for kids. It really hits hard. Like it's very like it's heavy. It deals with a lot of strong emotional themes, themes about growing up, finding your purpose, dealing with tragic loss. I mean, anyone who's my age knows the feeling of being in the bathroom, weeping your eyes out uncontrollably because of, spoiler alert, Mufasa's death. Well, was I the only one who actually went to the bathroom to do that? In any case, I know that you cried, and if you didn't, get out of here. Just kidding, you can stay even though you don't have a soul. But anyway, now I honestly think that Mary Poppins could be my most favorite Disney film of all time. I think it has officially knocked Lion King off its throne, ironically, considering that it's called The Lion King, and now Mary Poppins is the new king. Or queen? First of all, there's just the technical achievement of this movie. It was the first movie ever to combine live action with animation. In and of itself, that is an amazing accomplishment, but especially when you consider what Walt Disney was going through at the time with the intense butting of heads that he had with Pamela Travers. Now, I feel like a lot of what I'm going to say in this review has a lot of crossover into my review of Saving Mr. Banks, one of my most favorite movies of all time, because that movie is about the making of Mary Poppins. So I mean, there is going to be a lot of crossover in the things I liked about Saving Mr. Banks and the things I liked about Mary Poppins. But I think that just for the sake of this review, I'm going to be maybe repeating myself. But I mean, I made that review like almost 2 years ago, so like it doesn't even matter. Anyway, Walt Disney at the time was going up against a lot of creative differences with Pamela Travers. She was very, very close to this story as it was her own, but it was extraordinarily personal to her. I don't know if it was as personal as Saving Mr. Banks makes it out to be. I don't know if she had an abusive alcoholic father. I don't know if she was that impassioned about the story, but what is not debatable is that she was impassioned about it anyway, regardless of what might have happened to her to make her that way. Disney, as we all know, was just as impassioned about anything that he did. And he too had a personal stake in it because he made a promise to his daughters that he would turn the Mary Poppins books into a movie. So what he wanted to do, and as was expected of the Disney brand at the time, was to put animation into the Mary Poppins film, which was unacceptable to Mrs. Travers. That was unthinkable. But they kind of came to a compromise in that there is live action, but there also will be animated penguins and a lot of animated animals. And I also really just kind of as a side note, love that scene in Saving Mr. Banks where one of the Sherman brothers is like, oh, the penguins are animated. And then like Mrs. Travers storms off and he's like, Are we bringing in real penguins? It's a very good moment of levity right before Mrs. Travers lets Walt have it. So that's just one of the amazing technical achievements of this film. Now, I realize that, in 1964, having characters kind of like, disappear into chalk drawings, or have them floating away, or have them, like walking up a staircase made out of black chimney smoke might not have been too impressive, but I can almost guarantee that any audience that saw live action with animated figures, their minds were blown. And I guess it was all worth it in the end, because Mrs. Travers even wrote to Disney and said that it was a marvelous spectacle. And I guess she ultimately came around and liked what she saw. So the technical achievements are one thing. And of course, the cast is another thing. Probably the driving force behind this absolutely marvelous movie, with the exception maybe of the music, but more on that later. Julie Andrews, the wonderful, marvelous Julie Andrews, carries the film as the wonderful, marvelous, practically perfect in every way Mary Poppins. I'm actually reading Julie Andrews' memoir, Homework, a memoir of my Hollywood years. She has two of these biographies. The first one is about her childhood, and the second one, this one that I'm reading, is about her Hollywood years. And what I find so incredible about people who are ultra successful is that they're very human. They're just like us. I mean, there are exceptions, of course, but I find that when it comes to specifically those that make it in Hollywood, those that make it in movies, are very grateful to be there. They feel exceptionally lucky to be there. And actually, the title of David Tomlinson, who played Mr. Banks, the title of his biography is Luckier Than Most. So he too believes that a lot of his success is based on luck. And one of the many biographies of Dick Van Dyke is called My Lucky Life in Hollywood. So even Dick Van Dyke believes that he too is extraordinarily lucky to be where he is. And fun fact, the man is 96 years old, sharp as a tack, totally lucid, and seems to be having the time of his life. I really hope that man has 15 more years. Mary Poppins, quite honestly, is everything that a good teacher should be. She is very stern. She has established borders, but she never loses her temper. She commands respect without demanding it. She knows how to have a great time. She shows kids wonderful, magical lands. She teaches them. They don't even realize that they're being educated. I mean, that right there is the checklist, basically, for everything you need to be a good teacher. So if you're an aspiring teacher out there, if you're going to college for this stuff, then maybe you should ask your professors to just keep Mary Poppins on loop. Two kids that play Jane and Michael are really, really good. They are very well cast, and they're actually kind of similar to their real-life personas. The girl who played Jane, according to Julie Andrews, had perfect manners on set, and the boy who played Michael, according to Julie Andrews, was kind of ruckus, and he sort of ran around and caused trouble, not really in a malicious way, but just in a way that, 8-year-old kids do. Sadly, and turn away right now, click off if you don't want any Disney magic ruined for you, the boy only died when he was about 21. He was in India, and he contracted some kind of disease on the way back. I think in today's world, he would have been perfectly fine. He would have survived. But back then, medicine was not nearly as advanced as it is. And unfortunately, he only passed only when he was 21. So who knows what would have come of his career. But it's just a very tragic take on the lore behind Mary Poppins. David Tomlinson as Mr. Banks is also perfect. Apparently, he was a very established British star on stage before he had his breakthrough role in Mary Poppins, and from that he kind of became this Disney legend, Bedknobs and Brewsticks and other types of films like that. But he too is so good as this perpetually perplexed Mr. Banks. By the way, that could kind of be like his own slogan, Mary Poppins is practically perfect in every way. Mr. Banks is perpetually perplexed. And of course we have Dick Van Dyke, who was perfect as Bert, except for the accent. Now, I'm not really an accent expert. I know that if you want to sound like a British person, you're supposed to keep your lips kind of closed and all the vowels are supposed to be very front and center. I've tried it before, and I guess I have a moderate amount of success. I'm not going to try it here on camera because I don't want to embarrass myself, especially in front of my millions of UK viewers. But it is kind of agreed upon that his British accent is the worst British accent ever put on film by an American. Now, fortunately, and I say fortunately with heavy sarcasm, there have been other actors who have come along to sort of dethrone him as the worst. Keanu Reeves in some kind of vampire film, and Kevin Costner in Robin Hood, who, I mean, I saw that movie when I was a kid, and I didn't even know he was trying to be British. Like, that's how bad he was. I think the director and Kevin Costner collectively agreed that a British accent probably wasn't a high priority in that movie. I mean, it had him and Morgan Freeman. So, I mean, what more could you want, you know? I'm sure people just went there to see that. But, I mean, Morgan Freeman played a Middle Eastern man, and his accent was great. So I don't really know. Maybe Kevin Costner just couldn't do it. Anyway, since Dick Van Dyke is a national treasure, no one really puts it against him. But if you can sort of look past his ridiculous, almost parody-like nature of his Cockney accent, everything that he brings to the screen is extraordinary. I said this before in my review of Saving Mr. Banks, that there are characters in this movie that I aspire to be. Like, I want my personality, my character, to ultimately be like them. The driver in Saving Mr. Banks, Ralph, I want to be like him in the fact that he's like immune to criticism, and that he just has this beautifully positive outlook on life. And then in the same way in Mary Poppins, I kind of want to be like Bert, in that he just is so joyful all the time. Like in that one scene where the rain is coming down and it's sort of washing away all of his drawings, even Mary Poppins is kind of down. She says, "Oh, Bert, all your fine work washed away." And he said, "Oh, there's more where that came from. In the meantime, I might want to think about, switching businesses. This is good chestnut eating weather," something like that. And that kind of positivity is a characteristic that I hope to have much more than I do right now. So the actors and actresses are probably the driving force behind why this movie is so great. But I would be remiss if I did not mention how just as important the music is in this movie. The Sherman Brothers were absolute geniuses, and I guess I can kind of say half were, because one of them has passed on, one of them is still alive. So I'm grateful for that. I don't know if the other one is still working, but that'd be really great if he was. But this music is so iconic. I know it's kind of a cliche word. I don't really know how else to describe it, though. Like supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. That word and that song is iconic. Chim Chimney is iconic. Sidewalk artist or pavement artist is iconic. Feed the Birds is iconic. I mean, there are just so many songs in this movie that are iconic. Every single song is memorable. And one thing that I really like about this movie is that it doesn't, like The Lion King, it doesn't hold your hand in terms of the lyrics. Like when I was a kid and I was listening to Mr. Banks sing about like leaving a legacy behind, like he's almost having an existential crisis. Yeah, I didn't understand a word, but like now as an adult, listening to that song, it is so poignant and it is so powerful. A man has visions of walking with giants to carve his niche in the edifice of time. How poetic. It really is kind of a come down, like it's a bit of a bummer moment in the movie because Mr. Banks is sort of reflecting on the fact that he can't keep his life in order. Regardless of how hard he tries, he can't control his children. And now he realizes that he's going to be fired at the one thing that defines him, which is his job at the bank. What has his life amounted to? But of course, it's just a beautiful setup for the ultimate redemption arc of him realizing that the most important things in his life are his family. And honestly, this movie has a lot of parallels with A Christmas Carol. Like a ghost-like type figure kind of comes into this cold, hard-hearted man's life whose only concern is his bank account. And then through this transformation that is very uncomfortable for him, he learns about the values of love and family. No one ever really considers Mary Poppins to be a ghost, but like, what else could she be? I mean, obviously she interacts with the physical world, so she's not a ghost, but she almost feels like a mythological being, which is what I suppose was Pamela Travers's original intent. And the fact that she already knew Bert opens up a real can of worms, quite honestly. Like, how many times has she visited here? Is Bert from the same place that she is? Like, do they both live on this kind of like Mount Olympus of nannies and chimney sweeps that are assigned by other mythical beings to come in and save families. And in today's sequel, prequel, franchise era of movies that we live in, I'm surprised this question hasn't been asked before. Now, it's a question I don't want to be asked. I hope that no studio executives get their hands on that kind of question, but it's just kind of fun / very weird to think about. Or it's probably just me, but yeah. I'm so happy this movie exists. Feed the Birds is my all-time favorite Disney song, even before I officially decided that Mary Poppins is my favorite Disney movie. Feed the Birds is my favorite Disney song because it just completely encapsulates everything that Disney is to me and everything that Disney was to Walt. I mean, I didn't know the man, but he himself has said that Feed the Birds is what it's all about. I mean, I think that's actually a direct quote. Like, these little acts of kindness that bring hope and joy to people. These little simple, almost unnoticeable things. Feeding birds. It's just a tiny little act of kindness, a little time out of your day to make someone's life better. Even if it's someone or something you don't even really think about, like birds. But that's what it's all about. You're helping out this old bird lady by giving her a tuppence. You're helping out these birds by feeding them. That's what Disney is to me. Disney is about those little small acts of joy and charity and magic that make the world a little bit better than it is. I don't know if I'll keep that part in. A little too cheesy for me, but you know what? That's how I genuinely feel, and there it is. So just like Mary Poppins, this movie is practically perfect in every way, and of course, I'm giving this one a 10 out of 10. So what do you guys think about Mary Poppins? And also, what do you guys think about Mary Poppins Returns? I liked it more than the critics did. I thought it was pretty darn good. Especially having Lin-Manuel Miranda in there. But let me know what you thought about that one. Maybe a review of that one's coming soon, too. In any case, thank you guys so much for watching. I truly appreciate it, and I'll see you on the next cinematic adventure.